We are now going to hit the hammer and open the forum for the submission of testimony. I'd like to welcome Mr. Langer with the NFIB with the podium, please.
Well, can you all hear me? Thank you all for having me here today. It's really an absolute pleasure to be here. I want to bring all of you greetings from the 350,000 small business members of the National Federation of Independent Business, the nation's largest small business association. It's always a distinct honor to attend these hearings, and I want to talk very generally about the work that you do and how important it is to our members. I could be very trite and talk about heroism. I think we bandy that word about quite a bit, but I don't think it's overstating the case to say that the work you all do is heroic. To me, heroes are people who stand up in the face of folks who can't defend themselves and defend them from those who are bigger, stronger, and in many cases tougher. And that's really the work that you all do. Small businesses, as you are too well aware, are constantly under assault from an ever-increasing regulatory state. It's funny, I look around, for those of you who don't know, the room that we're in was the hearing room for the Interstate Commerce Commission, an entity that was developed in a way because many of the regulations that we face on a daily basis come under the federal government's Interstate Commerce Clause, the Constitution's Interstate Commerce Clause. And one of the things I talk about quite a bit in terms of regulation is the fact that regulations very rarely ever go away. They very rarely get smaller. They only serve to grow. And the Interstate Commerce Commission, for those of you who don't know, is no longer around. And it was one of the hardest programs I've ever seen killed, one of the rare programs that I've ever seen killed within the federal government. And so to me, there's no small amount of irony in the fact that we're here today talking about regulatory fairness. But the point is, we have this massive regulatory state, which I'm going to talk about generally. The point is, when that state moves forward and crosses the line from being mere enforcers of the law to being abusive, you all step in and act as protectors. And that defense is greatly needed in this day and age. While small businesses have their champions, few put more than words into their championship. You all act. You hold the state accountable for its misdeeds, a service which goes sorely unsung. And I am more than happy to sing those praises today. I could talk about individual regulations, but I really want to start off very briefly by talking about that regulatory state and stating it. I know there are my colleagues here from the Competitive Enterprise Institute, and they've shown us that the regulatory state costs the American economy over $1 trillion annually. That's about 1/14 of the entire GDP. But it's not just about the costs. It's about the little things that all add up, the things that the businesses have to do, the steps they have to take, the time they spend. Americans spent 8 billion hours. And I know that sounds like a made-up number, but literally Americans spent 8 billion hours last year filling out paperwork for the federal government. That's 2 weeks of paperwork for every adult man and woman in the United States. And it isn't just one regulation, obviously. We spend a lot of time as a people trying to find that magic bullet, that one regulation that we can fight against. But it's what I call the petty tyrannies of government, the little things that add up. The little things that add up are the slaps in the face that small business owners constantly face. And that's where you all come in, these petty tyrannies. When they rise from pettiness to something more, you, the Ombudsman, and you members of the Regulatory Fairness Boards, you step in. And in preparing for this meeting, I went back through my records, looked over the course of the last year. I'm doing very careful accounting these days of the businesses that we're directly touching. And I found literally dozens of instances of small businesses that I had recommended, that I had asked, that I'd contacted the Office of the National Ombudsman to help. And these are instances ranging from, small things, relatively minor infractions that were annoying but upsetting to the small business owners, to issues that were a matter of life and death for these business owners. And you know something? To me, there's nothing, very little more gratifying in my job as a regulatory manager for NFIB, nothing more gratifying when I can point to victories for my members. When you get that phone call, when someone can actually stop the unfeeling glacier of the state from moving forward and crushing a small business under its mass. To me, that's a cause for celebration. And I got a phone call like that about a year ago. It was last April from a member A member who had utilized just about every tool within his arsenal, within the small business owner's arsenal, to deal with a regulatory problem. This was one of those life and death situations. He was waiting for a permit approval from the EPA, and I'm not going to beat up on my friends at the EPA today. I think, you know, there are all sorts of other folks who can do that. This was one of those times, though, that EPA just happened to be the agency. There was another agency this year. I'm sorry to my friends from the EPA. I can tell you at least it didn't go as far as another agency I dealt with in the last year. When we complained to the Ombudsman's office, that agency swooped in with state police and their own enforcement agents to retaliate against the business. That matter hasn't been settled yet, but the Ombudsman's office is dealing with that as well. But the point is, this was an issue that had been going on with this other particular agency, who I won't name, but whose initials are EPA, who had been waiting for years for this permit approval. And he had gone through and spoken to people at the EPA's Office of Small Business Assistance, had been helping, but hadn't gotten very far, and they'd been talking to us, and we've been dealing with the issue. But we turned it over, we forwarded the complaint to the Office of the National Ombudsman. And this member testified before a regulatory fairness hearing held in Arizona before you, Chairman Owens, or National Ombudsman Owens. And so it was several months later that I got the phone call. I was at a conference, and he said, "Andrew, you won't believe this, but I just found the draft of my permit approval online." He was very erstwhile, this member, and he had actually found it. They hadn't approved it yet. So we made the appropriate phone calls, and indeed, several days later, the EPA approved his permit. And they saved his business. His business literally was on its deathbed. He was going to have to close down, but he got his permit. And I can only say that it was really the intervention, the work of the Office of the National Ombudsman for Small Business and the work of the Regulatory Fairness Board members that saved this member's business from closing. And in this day and age, that's incredibly important, and I want to close with that. You know, as we move forward, you know, in America, with the economy on the shaky grounds that it is right now, with people nervous about it, whether or not it's accurate that the economy is shaky, the fact is that what these businesses do is provide jobs, and they provide sustenance for their families. And we need to be doing more to keep them open. And I'm not a big fan of advocating for more money for government programs or for expanding government programs, but there are two that I am always constantly talking about for expansion, for funding more fully, the Office of Advocacy and the Office of National Ombudsman for Small Business, because dollar for dollar, the dollars you spend save billions of dollars. Well, all right, not dollar for dollar, you save billions, but for your budgets, you save billions of dollars for small businesses out there in the real world. You actually help the economy, improve the economy, expand the economy by keeping these businesses open. So thank you for that. Thank you for being here today, and thank you for your continued commitment to standing in defense of small business in America. Thank you. If you have any questions, I'm happy to take them. Well, thank you very much. Immigration has been a very tough issue for our members, who both think in terms of being Americans concerned about illegal immigrants coming in, to also being businesses which rely on immigrant labor, especially when they can't find labor here. And so, you know, we have gone out, and that H-2B program that you mentioned early on, that is one that we worked very hard to find out exactly how our members felt about it. We have members in your region. I live out on the eastern shore of Maryland, and there's a particular business I go to, Harris's Crab House on Kent Narrows. And Karen Ortel, who owns that business, is perhaps the most outspoken advocate on the H-2B issue. And for a while, I couldn't go in there because every time I would go in, Karen would yell at me about the fact that NFIB hadn't gotten fully engaged on the issue, and we worked very hard and did get engaged. On employee verification, it's really simple. Our members want to be in compliance with the law. They really do. And they want to make sure that the people that they are hiring are here legally. If for no other reason than the liability that accrues to it. I mean, of course, as we all know, and it may come up today, the Justice Department has just increased the penalties substantially for hiring illegal immigrants. And that's going to hit our members, our kind of members, small businesses hardest, because A, they're going to be unaware largely about the increase in penalties, and it's harder for them to do this verification. We just we want to make sure that as many businesses can take part of the program and that their rights are protected in the end. And so that's why we are doing what we can to make sure that any sort of e-verification program best serves the needs of our members. So thank you.
Sure, thank you.